I'm Astrid, 28 years old, and I'm standing outside my childhood home in suburban Minneapolis on Christmas Eve, still wearing my military uniform after 2 years serving in Afghanistan. Through the frosted window, I watch my family celebrating without me laughing around the dinner table like I never existed. My sister Aurora is wearing grandmother's pearl necklace, the one promised to me since I was 7. When I try my key, it doesn't work because they've changed the locks while I was defending our country. Before we dive into this shocking betrayal, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you a veteran who understands the sacrifice of service? Or perhaps someone who knows the pain of family rejection? Please hit that like button if you believe those who serve deserve to come home to love, not betrayal. Subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and justice. Now let me tell you how my own family tried to erase my existence and how my sister's greed nearly destroyed everything I'd worked for. My hand trembled as I rang the doorbell of the house where I'd grown up. 2 years of combat deployment, of sleeping in bunkers and dodging mortar fire, and I was more nervous now than I'd ever been in Afghanistan. The door opened, and my mother Helen's face went through a series of expressions that told me everything I needed to know. Shock, then discomfort, and finally a cold mask that made my blood run cold. "Astrid," she said, not moving to embrace me, not crying with joy at seeing her daughter home safe. "We weren't expecting you." The words hung in the air between us like a wall of ice. My father Robert appeared behind her, and I searched his face for the warmth. I remembered the pride he'd shown when I'd first enlisted. Instead, he avoided my eyes, mumbling something about the situation being complicated. That's when Aurora appeared, my younger sister, and my heart sank further. She was indeed wearing grandmother Dorothy's pearl necklace, running her fingers along it deliberately, as she smirked at me. "Well, look who decided to show up," she said, her voice dripping with something I'd never heard from her before. Pure venom. My brother Christopher stood in the hallway, silent as a statue, refusing to meet my eyes. His wife Madison peered around him, her expression uncomfortable. Nobody moved to let me in. I stood there in my uniform duffel bag at my feet, feeling like a stranger at my own home. Finally, my mother stepped aside with obvious reluctance. "I suppose you should come in," she said, as if I were an unwelcome salesperson rather than her daughter, who'd been serving overseas. The dining room was set for Christmas dinner, china plates and crystal glasses arranged perfectly. 5-place settings, not 6. The message couldn't have been clearer. Aurora noticed me counting and laughed a sharp sound that cut through the awkward silence. "Oh, we didn't know you were coming," she said with false sweetness. "Besides, I've moved into your old room, needed the space for my wedding planning." My old room. The place where I'd studied for my SATs, where I'd dreamed of serving my country, where I'd kept all my treasured possessions. "Where are my things?" I asked, though I was beginning to fear I already knew the answer. "We donated them to charity," my mother said briskly, busying herself with rearranging silverware that didn't need rearranging. "You'd been gone so long, and Aurora needed the space. We didn't think you'd mind." Didn't think I'd mind. 2 years of sending letters home, video calls when I could manage them, constantly telling them I'd be back. How could they not think I'd mind? Christopher's wife, Madison, whispered something about this being awkward, and Aurora shot her a look that could have frozen fire. The dinner that followed was the most painful meal of my life. They talked around me, over me, through me, as if I were a ghost at the table. Aurora dominated the conversation, talking about her wedding plans, her promotion at work, how she'd been taking care of our parents. "Someone had to be here," she said, pointedly looking at me, "while others were off playing soldier." Playing soldier. I thought of Private Martinez, who hadn't made it home, of the convoy that had hit an IED 2 months ago, of the Afghan children we'd helped get medical care. Playing soldier. "I was serving our country," I said quietly, and Aurora laughed again. "Oh, please, you abandoned this family. Do you know what people have been saying? That you came back different, unstable, PTSD. She pronounced the letters like they were a curse word. "I've had to manage the family reputation while you were gone." My parents nodded along with her words, and I felt the ground shifting beneath me like sand. "What about my college fund?" I asked, suddenly remembering the account my parents and I had built together before my deployment, the account that was supposed to be waiting for me when I returned to finish my degree. The silence that followed told me everything. "Aurora needed it for her wedding," my father finally said, not meeting my eyes. It was family money anyway. Family money. Money I'd contributed to from my part-time jobs through high school. Money that was specifically earmarked for my education. Gone. Christopher finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Astrid, maybe you should find somewhere else to stay tonight. Just until things calm down. until things calmed down, as if I were the one causing a disturbance by simply existing by coming home. Aurora's smirk widened, and she fingered the pearl necklace again. Grandmother's necklace? The one she'd pressed into my hand when I was 7, making me promise to wear it at my own wedding someday? Now it hung around the neck of the sister who was actively destroying my homecoming. I stood up from the table where I wasn't welcome, my legs surprisingly steady, despite the emotional earthquake happening inside me. "I need to get some air," I said, and nobody tried to stop me. As I walked out, I heard Aurora's voice behind me, casual and cruel. "Don't worry about coming back tonight. We changed the locks for security reasons. You understand?" Security reasons. As if I were the threat. As if the danger wasn't sitting right there at the table wearing stolen pearls and a satisfied smile. The next morning, I sat in my car outside Wells Fargo trying to make sense of what had happened. I'd slept fitfully in the back seat, my military training the only thing that made it bearable. Now I needed to access my accounts, figure out my financial situation, and find somewhere to stay. The bank opened at 9, and I was the first customer through the door. Trevor, the bank manager, recognized me immediately. His face lit up, then fell, as he pulled up my accounts on his computer. "Astrid, I'm so sorry, but this account shows a zero balance," he said, turning the monitor so I could see. $45,000. Gone. Every deployment bonus, every hazard pay payment, every penny I'd saved by eating MREs and sleeping in tents instead of taking leave. All of it vanished. "That's impossible," I said, my voice shaking. This was a joint account with my parents, but I'm the primary holder. They couldn't just empty it without my permission. Trevor's expression grew more troubled as he dug deeper into the transaction history. "It shows here that you granted power of attorney to your sister Aurora before your deployment. She's been making withdrawals over the past 18 months. See." He showed me document after document, all bearing what looked like my signature, but I knew I'd never signed them. I'd specifically given limited POA to my parents for emergency medical decisions, only nothing financial. These signatures were forgeries, good ones, but forgeries nonetheless. "I need copies of everything," I said, my mind racing. "Every transaction, every document, every signature card." Trevor nodded, already printing. "I remember Aurora coming in," he said quietly. "She always mentioned how proud the family was of your service, how she was helping manage things while you were gone. We had no reason to suspect." Of course she had. Aurora had always been clever, always known exactly what to say to get what she wanted. But this level of deception, this calculated theft from her own sister while I was in a combat zone, this was something else entirely. My next stop was the storage unit where I'd carefully packed away all my personal belongings before deployment. My grandfather's war medals from Vietnam, photo albums documenting our family history, my high school yearbooks, electronics, clothes, jewelry, everything that mattered to me. The manager at Secure Store looked confused when I gave him my unit number. "That unit's been empty for months," he said, checking his computer. "Shows here it was cleared out by Aurora Mitchell in June. She had authorization papers." The security footage was still available, and I watched in numb shock as Aurora directed movers to load everything into a truck. She was laughing with someone on the phone as they carried out my grandfather's footlocker, the one that contained his Purple Heart and Bronze Star. The manager printed out the authorization form she'd used another forgery with my signature. "She said you'd asked her to sell everything since you were making the military your career," he explained apologetically. "Even gave us a copy of deployment orders to prove you were overseas." I spent the rest of the morning on my laptop in a coffee shop searching for any trace of my belongings online. What I found made me sick. Aurora had systematically sold everything on eBay and Facebook Marketplace. My grandfather's medals, described as authentic Vietnam War memorabilia, had sold for $800. The family photo albums went for $50 as vintage photographs. Grandmother's jewelry box, hand-carved by my great-grandfather, had fetched $3,000 from an antique dealer. Everything that connected me to my family history, everything that proved I belonged to this lineage, had been converted to cash that went into Aurora's pocket. The apartment hunting that afternoon taught me just how thoroughly Aurora had poisoned my reputation in our community. The first property manager, a kind-looking woman named Barbara, was enthusiastic when I mentioned my veteran status. "We love renting to veterans," she said. "Reliable, responsible, respectful." But her phone rang while I was filling out the application, and I watched her face change as she listened. "I see," she said several times, glancing at me with growing concern. When she hung up, she pushed the application back across the desk unsigned. "I'm sorry, but we've just rented the unit," she said, not meeting my eyes, This happened twice more at different complexes. By the third rejection, I confronted the manager. "Please, just tell me what's being said," I begged. He hesitated, then admitted, "We received a call warning us about you. Your sister said you have violent episodes, that you threatened your family, that you're unstable from your deployment. She said she was calling all the rental agencies as a public service." A public service. My own sister was systematically destroying my ability to find shelter and calling it a public service. That night, I parked in a Walmart lot, grateful for their policy of allowing overnight parking. I'd bought a sleeping bag and pillow. With the little cash I had left my military training, making the car camping bearable if not comfortable. As I lay in the back seat, I thought about the soldiers I'd served with, who'd warned me about difficult homecomings. But they'd talked about adjusting to civilian life, about nightmares and loud noises. Nobody had warned me that the enemy might be sitting at your own family's dinner table, wearing your grandmother's pearls, and systematically destroying your life with a smile. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts, wondering who I could trust, who might help. But Aurora had been thorough. Our mutual friends from high school were posting pictures from her engagement party, an elaborate affair that looked like it had cost thousands, probably paid for with my college fund. In every photo, Aurora played the part of the devoted daughter, the responsible sister who'd stayed home, while I'd selfishly gone off to war. She'd rewritten our entire narrative, and I wasn't there to defend myself. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 2 years in Afghanistan, constantly watching for threats, protecting my fellow soldiers, serving my country with honor. But the real danger had been here at home, wearing familiar faces and family names. The ambush had been planned long before I'd returned, executed with precision, while I was thousands of miles away, unable to defend myself. And unlike combat, where the enemy wore different uniforms and the rules of engagement were clear, this battlefield was murky, personal, and devastating in ways that no military training could have prepared me for. 3 days later, I sat in the waiting room of Tech Force Solutions, a veteran-friendly company that specifically recruited former military personnel for their security and logistics divisions. My resume was solid, my discharge papers honorable, and the initial phone screening had gone perfectly. The HR director, Bethany, had seemed genuinely excited to meet me. "Your military experience in communications and logistics is exactly what we're looking for," she'd said. I'd arrived 30 minutes early, my one good civilian suit, pressed my shoes, shined to military standards. Bethany greeted me warmly, leading me to a conference room with awards for veteran employment displayed on the walls. The interview started beautifully. We discussed my deployment experience, my leadership roles, my technical qualifications. I could see her nodding approvingly, making notes about my problem-solving skills and ability to work under pressure. 20 minutes in, I was confident this would work out. Then her desk phone rang. "I'm so sorry," she said, glancing at the caller ID. "I usually don't take calls during interviews, but this is marked urgent. Do you mind?" I shook my head, trying to stay calm as she answered, but I watched her expression change from professional interest to concern, then to something that looked like fear. "I see," she said, her eyes flicking to me. "Yes, thank you for letting us know. We take these matters very seriously." When she hung up, the warmth had drained from her face. "Ms. Mitchell, I've just received some concerning information about you from a family member." My heart sank. "Aurora. Of course. Your sister says she's calling out of concern for our other employees. She claims you've been having violent episodes since your return, that you've threatened your family members, and that you're refusing to seek treatment for severe PTSD. She says she felt obligated to warn us." I tried to explain, to tell Bethany about the financial theft, the systematic destruction of my life, but I could see she wasn't listening. Fear had taken root, the kind of fear that no amount of explanation could uproot. "She's lying," I said simply. "I've never threatened anyone. I don't have violent episodes. This is about money she stole from me while I was deployed." But Bethany was already standing the interview clearly over. "We'll be in touch," she said, the universal code for never contact us again. "Thank you for your service," she added the words, now sounding hollow and meaningless. That evening, I discovered Aurora's campaign had expanded beyond phone calls. Madison Christopher's wife reached out through a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Check Facebook," was all it said. What I found there made my blood run cold. Aurora had created an elaborate fiction using old photos from my deployment. Pictures of me at the shooting range became evidence of my obsession with weapons. A photo of me having a beer with my unit after a successful mission was captioned as proof of my alcohol dependency. She'd even photoshopped images to make it look like I was drinking alone, adding timestamps that suggested a pattern of substance abuse. The posts were carefully crafted to seem concerned rather than malicious. Praying for my sister as she struggles with her demons. Read one. If you see her, please be careful and contact me immediately. She's not the same person who left for war. Each post was tagged with local employers, community groups, and veteran organizations. The comments were full of sympathy for Aurora, praise for her bravery in speaking out, and promises to keep an eye out for her dangerous sister. I tried reporting the posts as false, but Facebook's response was slow. Meanwhile, the damage spread like digital wildfire. Local business owners shared Aurora's warnings in community groups. The Neighborhood Watch added my photo to their Persons of Concern list. Even the veterans' support groups I'd hoped to join were now viewing me with suspicion. I was being erased from my own life story and rewritten as a villain in Aurora's fabricated narrative. The next blow came when I visited the VA support center, desperate for help, navigating both my benefits and the assault on my reputation. Marissa, the intake counselor, was kind and professional listening. As I explained my situation, she'd just started entering my information into the system when the front door burst open. Aurora stood there in designer clothes I recognized as being well beyond her salary, unless you counted my stolen money. "Thank God I found you," she announced dramatically loud enough for everyone in the waiting room to hear. "I've been so worried. Astrid, please, you need help. These delusions about the family stealing from you, these paranoid fantasies, they're getting worse." The other veterans in the waiting room shifted uncomfortably, some moving away from me. I saw one young man in a wheelchair actually roll himself backward, fear flashing across his face. "She's lying," I said firmly, but Aurora was already in full performance mode. "See, this is what I mean. She thinks everyone's out to get her. She accused me of stealing her things when she's the one who asked me to sell them before deployment. She's been sending threatening messages, showing up at our parents' house at all hours. We're terrified." She produced a folder of what I assumed were more forged documents, trying to hand them to Marisa. To her credit, Marisa stood up and positioned herself between Aurora and me. "Ma'am, this is a safe space for veterans. If you're not here for services, I need to ask you to leave." Aurora's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the fury beneath. "I'm trying to protect other veterans from her," she hissed. "She's dangerous. She was discharged for mental instability." That was a lie too far. My discharge was honorable, my service record impeccable. "Security!" Marisa called calmly, and 2 guards appeared. Aurora left, but not before loudly announcing she'd be warning all the local veteran groups about the danger. After Aurora's dramatic exit, Marissa closed the door to her office and turned to me with knowing eyes. "Let me guess," she said. "Family member with power of attorney who cleaned out your accounts while you were deployed?" My shock must have shown on my face. "You're not the first veteran I've seen dealing with this kind of betrayal," she continued. "The false social media posts, the calls to employers, the public scenes, it's almost textbook. Someone wants your benefits, your inheritance, or just wants you gone." The local newspaper had wanted to run a hometown hero feature about my service part of their Veterans Day coverage. The reporter Brian had been enthusiastic during our initial phone interview, asking about my deployment experiences and future plans. We'd scheduled a photo shoot and a longer interview for the following week. But the morning of the appointment, Brian called to cancel. His voice was stilted, uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, but we've received information that calls into question some aspects of your service record. We need to verify everything before we can proceed." "What information?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Brian hesitated, then admitted, "Your sister provided documentation suggesting you were disciplined multiple times for insubordination, that you were almost dishonorably discharged, and that you've been exaggerating your service record." She had very official-looking papers. More forgeries, no doubt. I offered to bring my actual service records, my commendations, letters from my commanding officers, but Brian was clearly spooked. "Maybe after things are cleared up," he said vaguely. The story never ran. Another piece of my identity erased another accomplishment twisted into suspicion. That night, as I sat in my car, scrolling through job rejection emails, I realized the full scope of Aurora's plan. She wasn't just stealing my money or my belongings. She was stealing my future, my reputation, my ability to rebuild. Every door I tried to open, she'd already poisoned. Every hand extended in help was pulled back after a phone call or a Facebook message. She'd turned my hometown into a minefield, where every step forward triggered another explosion. The sister who'd once made flower crowns with me in our backyard was now systematically destroying every flower in my path, leaving only scorched earth behind. The restraining order paperwork arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was sitting in a public library, using their computers to continue my job search. A sheriff's deputy found me there, serving me with papers that made my hands shake. Aurora had filed for an emergency protective order claiming I'd been stalking her, sending threatening messages, and showing up at her workplace. The evidence she'd submitted included text messages I'd never sent, emails from accounts I'd never created, and witness statements from people I'd never met. My last $1,500 went to retaining Clarence Waters, a lawyer who specialized in false accusation cases. He reviewed Aurora's evidence with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen doctored documents before. "These text messages," he said, pointing to printouts. "Notice how they're all screenshots, no phone records to back them up, and these emails come from addresses created just days ago. Your sister's not as clever as she thinks, but clever enough to force me to spend money I didn't have defending myself against lies." Officer Jerome Martinez, the cop who'd served the restraining order, pulled me aside after I'd left the lawyer's office. "Off the record," he said quietly, "I'd start recording everything, every interaction, every phone call where legal. Your sister's stories don't add up, but without proof, it's her word against yours." He slipped me a business card. "My cousin came back from Iraq to similar family drama. Document everything. The truth has a way of surfacing if you preserve it." The next family ambush came at my cousin Emily's 30th birthday party. I'd debated attending, but Emily had always been like a sister to me, and I hoped that extended family might be more reasonable. I should have known better when I saw the cars in the driveway. Aurora had arrived early, no doubt spreading her poison before I could defend myself. I walked in to find the entire family gathered in the living room like some kind of intervention. Aunt Diane, my mother's sister, stood up the moment she saw me. "How dare you show your face here?" she said, voice dripping with disdain. "After everything you've put this family through." "What exactly have I put this family through?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I served my country for 2 years. I came home to find my accounts emptied, my belongings sold, and lies being spread about me." Uncle Frank, usually jovial and kind, shook his head sadly. "Aurora showed us the emails, Astrid. The threats you've been sending. We've seen the posts about your drinking, your violence. You chose war over family, and look what it's done to you." Aurora sat in the center of it all like a spider in her webbed tears, streaming down her face in a performance worthy of an Oscar. "I just want my sister back," she sobbed. "The sister who left for Afghanistan, not this angry, paranoid person who came back." The family murmured sympathetically, passing her tissues, while looking at me like I was a dangerous stranger. Even Emily, whose birthday it was, wouldn't meet my eyes. "Ask her about the $45,000, I said loudly. "Ask her about grandmother's jewelry, grandfather's medals. Ask her where all my belongings went." But Aurora was ready for that too. "She asked me to sell those things," she said through fake tears. "Said she didn't want attachments holding her back. Now she's forgotten and blames me. The doctor said memory issues are common with PTSD." Doctors. What doctors? I'd never seen any doctors because I didn't have PTSD. But the family believed her performance, choosing the comfortable lie over the uncomfortable truth. The revelation about my grandmother's death hit me the hardest. She'd passed while I was deployed, something my family had somehow forgotten to mention during our few phone calls. I found out only when I tried to visit her, hoping she at least would believe me. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was the one who broke the news. "Oh, honey, Dorothy passed 8 months ago. Your sister handled all the arrangements." Such a devoted granddaughter staying by her bedside those final weeks. Those final weeks, when grandmother was vulnerable, medicated, possibly confused. The will had been changed just 2 weeks before her death, leaving everything to Aurora, the house worth $400,000, the investment accounts, the family heirlooms. I tracked down Carla, the hospice worker who'd cared for grandmother. She remembered Aurora's visits clearly. "She was very insistent about getting papers signed," Carla recalled carefully. "Kept saying it was urgent family business. Mrs. Dorothy seemed confused, kept asking for you, actually. But your sister said you were unreachable in Afghanistan." Unreachable. I'd sent grandmother letters every week, called when I could. Aurora had intercepted them all, creating the narrative that I'd abandoned the family. The lawyer who'd overseen the will changes had since retired to Florida, conveniently unreachable. The witnesses were Aurora's friends, people who'd benefit from her newfound wealth. Every avenue I pursued hit a dead end, but the picture was becoming clearer. This hadn't been a crime of opportunity. Aurora had planned this meticulously while I was overseas, unable to interfere. The disability benefits fraud attempt was her boldest move yet. I discovered it when I received a notice from the VA about a pending guardianship hearing. Aurora had filed paperwork claiming I was mentally incompetent due to combat-related trauma, unable to manage my own affairs. She was seeking to become my legal guardian, which would give her control over any VA benefits I might receive, including disability payments for a minor shoulder injury I'd sustained during deployment. Judge Catherine Miller presided over the emergency hearing Clarence had demanded. Aurora arrived with her own lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit my money had probably paid for. She'd prepared a compelling case, the threatening messages, statements from family members about my erratic behavior, even a psychological evaluation from a doctor I'd never met. Your Honor, her lawyer intoned, Ms. Aurora Mitchell is simply trying to protect her sister and ensure she gets the help she needs. Interesting, Judge Miller said dryly, reviewing the documents. This psychological evaluation is supposedly from Dr. Richard Stone, but his license was revoked 2 years ago for fraud. These threatening messages show metadata inconsistencies, and this family testimony seems remarkably similar in wording as if coached. She turned her sharp gaze on Aurora. Ms. Mitchell filing false documents with the court is a felony. I'm dismissing this petition and referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation. Aurora's composure finally cracked. She's lying about everything, she shrieked. I'm the victim here. She abandoned us, and now she wants to take everything. The bailiff stepped forward as Aurora continued her tirade, revealing the real person beneath the concerned sister act. But even this courtroom victory felt hollow. She'd still stolen my money, my belongings, my family's trust. The investigation would take months, maybe years, while I was homeless and struggling. The public humiliation at First Baptist Church was her cruelest move yet. She'd organized what she called a prayer intervention for me telling Pastor David and the congregation that I was struggling with mental health issues from my deployment. I found out only when Nancy, an older woman from the congregation who'd known me since childhood, called to warn me. She's got the whole church praying for your healing, Nancy said. But something doesn't sit right with me about how she's talking about you. I arrived at the church to find a packed sanctuary, Aurora at the front, with my parents playing the role of the concerned sister to perfection. We're here to pray for Astrid's healing, she announced to the congregation. For the demons she brought back from war, for the paranoia that makes her think her family is against her, for the addiction issues she's developed. Each lie was delivered with tears and trembling voice, painting me as a broken soldier in need of divine intervention. Pastor David, a good man who'd known our family for years, had been completely taken in. He called for the congregation to lay hands on me, to pray for my deliverance from the spirits of war. I stood there surrounded by well-meaning people who thought they were helping, while Aurora smirked behind their backs. But Nancy was recording on her phone, catching Aurora's expression when she thought no one was looking. The mask had slipped, revealing the satisfaction underneath. I'm not broken, I said loudly, interrupting the prayers. I served my country with honor. The only demons in this room are the lies being told about me. The congregation shifted uncomfortably, unsure what to believe. But I was done being silent, done letting Aurora control the narrative. Ask her about the money she stole. Ask about the forged documents. Ask why she's so invested in painting me as mentally ill. Pastor David looked between us, confusion replacing certainty. But Aurora was already switching tactics, crumpling into tears, playing the wounded sister once again. The prayer meeting dissolved into chaos, but at least I'd planted seeds of doubt. The truth was starting to crack through her carefully constructed facade. Madison's text came at 2 a.m, just 5 words that changed everything. Can't stand this anymore. Meet. Christopher's wife had always been quiet at family gatherings, overshadowed by Aurora's dominant personality. But as I sat across from her at a 24-hour diner, I saw a different woman. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone, but her voice was steady. I've been recording everything, she said simply. Every conversation where Aurora bragged about her plans, every family meeting where she coached people on what to say about you, I have it all. She played recording after recording, Aurora's voice clear and damning. Astrid's so stupid thinking her military service means something. By the time she gets back, I'll have everything. Another recording. Mom and Dad are easy to manipulate. Just keep reminding them how she abandoned us. And perhaps most chilling, the VA benefits will be the cherry on top. Fake a few documents claim she's mentally unstable, and I'll be managing those checks for life. Why didn't you come forward sooner? I asked, trying not to sound accusatory despite my anger. Madison's eyes filled with tears. Christopher threatened to divorce me if I interfered. Aurora has something on him too, some business deal that went bad. She's been blackmailing him for years. But watching them destroy you while you were serving our country. I can't be part of this anymore. She handed me a flash drive. Everything's on here. Audio files, screenshots of texts, even video from family dinners where they planned this whole thing. The veteran community proved to be my strongest allies once the truth started emerging. Marisa from the VA Center had quietly begun her own investigation after Aurora's dramatic scene. She connected me with Samuel Rodriguez, a Marine veteran who'd started a nonprofit helping veterans dealing with family fraud. "You'd be surprised how common this is," he told me, offering me temporary housing in a small apartment the organization maintained for veterans in crisis. "Family members see dollar signs when you deploy. They think you won't fight back because you're too proud or too broken." Samuel introduced me to a network of veterans who'd faced similar betrayals. There was Jennifer, whose husband had sold her house while she was in Iraq; Marcus, whose brother had claimed his re-enlistment bonus; Sarah, whose mother had taken out credit cards in her name. We met weekly, sharing resources and strategies. It was the first time since returning home that I didn't feel alone. These people understood that the hardest battles sometimes happened after you took off the uniform. Angela Chen, the forensic accountant Clarence brought in, was a force of nature. Within 2 weeks, she'd traced every dollar Aurora had stolen, creating a paper trail that told the complete story. "Your sister wasn't just stealing opportunistically," Angela explained, showing me spreadsheets that made my head spin. "This was systematic. She opened accounts in your name, transferred money through multiple banks to hide the trail, even invested some in cryptocurrency, trying to make it untraceable." But Angela was better at her job than Aurora was at covering her tracks. The shopping spree evidence was particularly damning. Aurora had used my money for a Mercedes-Benz C-Class purchased 3 days after emptying my main account. Designer clothing from Nordstrom and Saks, thousands in a single day. A Miami Beach vacation at the Fontainebleau, complete with spa treatments and champagne dinners. Jewelry from Tiffany's, ironically including a pearl necklace to replace grandmother's that she'd already claimed. "She wasn't just stealing for need," Angela noted. "This was about living a fantasy life, funded by your sacrifice." Pearl Hendricks, my grandmother's 90-year-old neighbor, became an unexpected hero in the story. She'd witnessed the will signing through her window, her apartment directly across from grandmother's room. I knew something wasn't right. Pearl told me, her voice strong despite her age. Dorothy was so drugged up she could barely hold a pen. Aurora was guiding her hand, rushing her, not letting her read anything. I told myself it wasn't my business, but I've regretted staying silent ever since. Pearl had something even more valuable: photographs. She was an amateur birdwatcher who photographed everything from her window. Her telephoto lens had inadvertently captured Aurora, forcing grandmother's hand to sign documents, grandmother's confused and frightened expression clear in the images. "I'm old," Pearl said firmly. "I've got nothing to lose by telling the truth now. Your grandmother loved you fiercely. She'd want justice." The digital investigation, led by Marcus, a veteran who'd worked in military intelligence, uncovered the full extent of Aurora's online fraud campaign. Using specialized software, he proved that all the threatening emails and messages attributed to me came from IP addresses linked to Aurora's devices. The metadata on the edited photos showed they'd been altered using software registered to her email. Even the fake psychological evaluation could be traced to her laptop. "She was arrogant," Marcus explained. "Didn't think anyone would dig this deep. But everything leaves a digital footprint." The turning point came when we discovered Aurora's secret email account, the one she used to coordinate her schemes. Marcus had found it through a password reset link she'd carelessly used on a public computer at the library. The emails were a goldmine of evidence correspondence with the forger, who'd created the fake documents messages to friends bragging about her plans. Even a draft email to a lawyer asking about the statute of limitations for fraud. She'd documented her own crimes in meticulous detail. Nancy from the church proved to be another crucial ally. Her recording of the prayer intervention clearly showed Aurora's expressions of satisfaction when she thought no one was looking. But Nancy had done more than just record that day. She'd been quietly interviewing congregation members, many of whom had started noticing inconsistencies in Aurora's stories. "She claimed you were violent," Nancy told me, "but then said you were too depressed to get out of bed. Said you were drinking heavily, but also that you were paranoid about being poisoned. The stories never matched up." As word spread through the veteran community about what had happened to me, more support materialized. A veteran-owned moving company volunteered to help when I eventually got housing. A lawyer who specialized in military law offered pro bono assistance. Veterans who'd built successful businesses after service started reaching out with job opportunities determined to help me rebuild. The brotherhood and sisterhood I'd found in the military extended beyond active duty, creating a protective circle Aurora couldn't penetrate with her lies. Christopher finally broke his silence during a secret meeting at Madison's mother's house. He looked haggard, aged 10 years in the months since I'd returned. "I wanted to help," he said, not meeting my eyes. But Aurora knows about the tax issues with my business. One word from her to the IRS, and I lose everything. She's been holding it over me for 3 years. Madison gripped his hand as he continued. But I can't watch her destroy you anymore. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything I know. His testimony would prove crucial. Christopher had been present for many of Aurora's planning sessions, had heard her discuss the forgeries, the schemes, the lies. He had emails where she'd explicitly stated her intentions to claim my inheritance and benefits. He also revealed that Aurora had done this before to a college roommate who'd mysteriously dropped out after Aurora gained access to her student loan refunds. The pattern of behavior went back years, but I'd been her biggest score. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source, Aurora's ex-boyfriend, Daniel. He reached out through social media after hearing about the legal battles. She did similar things to me, he admitted. Smaller scale, but the same patterns. Gaslighting, financial manipulation, character assassination, when I tried to leave. I have recordings, too, from when we were together. She actually bragged about what she planned to do to you when you deployed. Said military families were easy targets because they were too proud to admit being victimized. With mountains of evidence accumulated, Clarence was confident we could not only defend against Aurora's false accusations, but pursue criminal charges. The forensic accounting showed clear fraud exceeding $200,000 when including the house inheritance. The forged documents constituted multiple felonies. The elder abuse charges for manipulating grandmother were serious enough for potential prison time. For the first time in months, I felt hope. The truth was no longer just my word against hers. It was documented, recorded, photographed, and witnessed by dozens of people. Clarence spent weeks building an airtight case that read like a crime thriller. Criminal charges included grand theft, identity fraud, elder abuse forgery, and cyber harassment. The civil suit sought recovery of all stolen assets, plus damages for defamation and emotional distress. Your sister thought she was smart, Clarence said, reviewing our evidence. But criminals always make mistakes when they get greedy, and Aurora got very greedy. I struggled with the decision to pursue charges against family, but Clarence reminded me this stopped being about family when Aurora decided to systematically destroy my life. Aurora must have sensed the walls closing in because she suddenly called for a family meeting to resolve everything peacefully. My parents, still under her influence, pressured me to attend. Family doesn't sue family, my mother pleaded over the phone. But Madison warned me it was a trap. She'd overheard Aurora on the phone with someone about 5,150 protocols and emergency psychiatric holds. The meeting was designed to provoke me into an outburst that could be used to have me involuntarily committed. If I was locked in a psychiatric facility, I couldn't pursue legal action. I agreed to attend, but came prepared. Clarence accompanied me as my legal representation. Marcus and Samuel waited outside as witnesses. I wore a wire, legally recording everything with one-party consent laws. Nancy from church sat in her car across the street with a telephoto lens ready to document through the windows. If Aurora wanted to play games, I was done being an unwitting participant. This time I knew the battlefield and had my own forces deployed. The meeting was set at my parents' house, the same dining room where I'd been excluded from Christmas dinner. Aurora had arranged the seating like a tribunal with her at the head of the table, flanked by my parents. 2 people I didn't recognize sat to her left, later introduced as a family therapist and a crisis counselor she'd hired. The trap was obvious, but I walked in calmly, Clarence beside me, carrying a briefcase full of evidence that would shatter Aurora's carefully constructed world. Astrid. Aurora began in her fake, concerned voice. We're all here because we love you and want to help you get better. I noticed the crisis counselor had paperwork partially filled out my name already at the top. The therapist, who I later learned wasn't licensed in our state, kept making notes every time I moved. The paranoid delusions, the false accusations, the stalking behavior, it all stems from your untreated PTSD. If you'll just admit you need help, we can get you into a facility today. I don't have PTSD, I said calmly. What I have is a sister who stole $200,000 from me while I was serving our country. Aurora's mask flickered, but held. See these delusions again. Mom, Dad tell her how worried we've been. But something had shifted in my parents' expressions. The evidence Madison had been slowly sharing with them, careful doses of truth, had planted seeds of doubt. My father wouldn't look at Aurora, and my mother's hands trembled. That's when Christopher stood up. Aurora hadn't expected him to attend, and her face went white when she saw him. I can't do this anymore, he said, voice shaking but determined. Astrid's not delusional. Everything she's saying is true. I've watched Aurora steal from her forged documents, spread lies. I have proof. He pulled out his phone, ready to play recordings, and Aurora lunged across the table, trying to grab it. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered completely. "You pathetic coward!" she screamed at Christopher. "After everything I've kept quiet about for you, you think you can betray me?" She turned on my parents. "And you two so easily swayed. I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who took care of everything while she was playing soldier. That money was mine. I earned it." The therapist and counselor she'd hired exchanged alarmed glances, realizing they'd been brought into something very different from what they'd been told. Clarence chose that moment to open his briefcase, laying out document after document on the table. Bank records showing the theft, photographs of grandmother being forced to sign papers, recordings of Aurora bragging about her schemes, the forged power of attorney documents alongside real ones showing the dramatic differences, the forensic accounting report detailing every stolen penny. My parents' faces went from confusion to shock to horror as they realized the depth of their daughter's deception. "This is entrapment," Aurora shrieked, but Clarence remained calm. "No, Ms. Mitchell, this is evidence. Evidence that's already been submitted to the district attorney, who's issued a warrant for your arrest." As if on cue, we heard cars pulling up outside. Aurora ran to the window to see Detective Rodriguez and two uniformed officers approaching the house. The woman who'd orchestrated such elaborate schemes was reduced to panicked animal behavior, looking for an escape that didn't exist. "You destroyed everything," she screamed at me as Rodriguez read her rights. "You always had to be the special one, the hero. Do you know what it was like being compared to you? Poor Aurora. Not as smart as Astrid, not as brave as Astrid, not as good as Astrid. I deserved that money. I deserved grandmother's love. I deserved everything you had." The officers had to physically restrain her as she lunged at me, her perfectly styled hair wild, her designer clothes disheveled. My parents stood frozen as their younger daughter was handcuffed in their dining room. The fantasy Aurora had sold them crumbled with each curse she hurled, each threat she made. "I'll destroy all of you," she screamed as they led her away. "You'll pay for this. I'll tell everyone what you really are." Even then, she was trying to control the narrative, but no one was listening anymore. The neighbors had come out to watch Nancy documenting everything the truth finally exposed in the bright light of day. The trial was swift. Aurora's lawyer tried to paint her as a devoted daughter, driven to extremes by family dysfunction, but the evidence was overwhelming. Witness after witness testified to her lies, her schemes, her calculated destruction of my life. Pearl's photographs of the forced will signing were particularly damning. The forensic evidence proved systematic fraud over years. Even the fake therapist testified that Aurora had tried to hire him specifically to have me committed. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts: grand theft, elder abuse, identity fraud, forgery, cyber harassment, and attempted false imprisonment. The judge, a veteran himself, showed no mercy in sentencing. "You targeted your own sister while she was serving our country in a war zone," he said, disgust clear in his voice. "You abused your elderly grandmother in her final days. You showed a callousness and greed that shocks the conscience. 5 years in prison, full restitution of all stolen funds, and a permanent restraining order." Aurora screamed obscenities as they led her away in shackles. The civil trial awarded additional damages for defamation and emotional distress. Aurora's designer goods were auctioned to pay restitution. The Mercedes was sold. The inheritance was rightfully transferred to me, though grandmother's house held too many painful memories to keep. I sold it and used the money to establish a fund for veterans dealing with family fraud. Grandmother would have approved of using her legacy to help others who'd served. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. The newspaper ran the real story of my service and Aurora's crimes. Local businesses that had rejected me reached out with apologies and job offers. The church held a real prayer service, this time praying for healing from family betrayal and celebrating justice served. People who'd believed Aurora's lies came forward with apologies, ashamed of how easily they'd been manipulated. The narrative was finally corrected, the truth burning away the lies like sun through fog. The morning after Aurora's sentencing, I sat at my parents' kitchen table for the first time in almost a year. They looked older, diminished by the weight of their choices. My mother's hands shook as she poured coffee, and my father stared at the table where our family had shared thousands of meals before everything shattered. "We failed you," he said, simply the words hanging heavy between us. "We chose the easy lie over the difficult truth. We let her poison us against our own daughter." "Why?" I asked, needing to understand. Why was it so easy to believe I was the problem? My mother wiped tears that hadn't stopped falling since the trial. She was here, she whispered, telling us stories every day about how you'd changed, how the war had damaged you. She showed us those photos, those messages. We wanted to believe our daughter who stayed was taking care of us, not stealing from the one who left. The pain in her voice was real, but I couldn't offer comfort yet. Trust once shattered isn't easily rebuilt. I need time, I told them honestly. I'll never be your daughter who left for Afghanistan again. Too much has happened, but maybe someday we can build something new. They nodded, understanding that forgiveness was a journey, not a destination. I left their house with no promises, but for the first time with the possibility of a future that might include them on the periphery. Healing would take time, but at least the wound was clean now, no longer festering with lies. Christopher and I met weekly for coffee, slowly rebuilding our sibling relationship. He'd started therapy to deal with years of Aurora's manipulation and his guilt over not protecting me. She had us all so twisted up, he said during one meeting. Made us believe that loyalty to family meant enabling her crimes. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to stand up to her sooner. Madison usually joined us, and she'd become the sister I'd actually chosen. Their support during the trial had cost them relationships with extended family members who still couldn't accept Aurora's guilt, but they'd chosen truth over comfort. The job offer from Veterans United Services came through Marissa at the VA Center. They needed someone to run their new family fraud prevention program, helping veterans protect their assets before deployment and supporting those who'd been victimized after. My personal experience made me uniquely qualified to spot the warning signs, understand the manipulation tactics, and guide others through the legal and emotional recovery process. The salary was good, but more importantly, the work gave meaning to my suffering. Within 6 months, I'd helped dozens of veterans recover stolen assets and protect themselves from predatory family members. There was James, whose ex-wife had emptied his accounts while he was in Syria, Maria, whose uncle had sold her deceased father's house while she was stationed in Germany, David, whose mother had taken out $30,000 in loans using his information. Each case reminded me that Aurora wasn't unique. She was just one of many who saw military service as an opportunity for exploitation. I spoke at veteran events about financial protection, always starting with my own story. The shame that had initially silenced me transformed into powerful advocacy. Your uniform doesn't make you invulnerable, I'd tell rooms full of service members preparing to deploy. Sometimes the greatest threats to your security are waiting at your own kitchen table. Protect yourselves legally before you leave, and don't let anyone make you feel guilty for it. The presentations were filmed and distributed to bases worldwide, helping countless others avoid my fate. The grandmother's pearl necklace returned to me in an unexpected way. Grace Chen, the antique dealer who'd bought it from Aurora's online sale, had seen the news coverage of the trial. She drove 3 hours to personally return it, refusing any payment. I lost my son in Afghanistan, she said quietly. I couldn't keep something stolen from another Gold Star family member. She'd misunderstood my relationship to the military, but her compassion was genuine. The pearls felt different around my neck, now heavier with meaning, a reminder of both betrayal and redemption. My apartment became a gathering place for what Samuel called Aurora survivors, veterans who'd faced similar family betrayals. We cooked meals together, shared resources, celebrated victories in recovery. Jennifer got her house back through legal action. Marcus successfully pressed charges against his brother. Sarah's mother went to prison for identity theft. We were a strange family, bonded by shared trauma and mutual support, proving that blood doesn't always determine who stands by you in battles. Madison gave birth to a daughter that spring, naming her Dorothy after my grandmother. She needs to know about the woman she's named for, Madison said, placing the baby in my arms. The real story, not Aurora's version. I became Aunt Astrid, a title that meant more because it was chosen, not assigned by blood. Christopher documented everything, determined that his daughter would grow up knowing the importance of truth over comfortable lies. We were building a new family narrative, one based on choice and integrity. The veteran community continued to embrace me in ways my blood family never had. I received a commendation from the Veterans Administration for my work in fraud prevention. The local VFW made me an honorary member despite my relatively young age. When I bought my first house, a modest 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, veterans showed up to help me move paint and repair. They understood that home meant something different when your first one had betrayed you. A year after the trial, I received a letter from Aurora in prison. I almost threw it away, unread, but decided to face whatever manipulation she was attempting now. It was exactly what I expected. No apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just pages of blame and self-pity. She was the victim, I was the destroyer, everyone had conspired against her. I filed it with the legal documents evidence that even prison hadn't changed her fundamental nature. Some people are incapable of growth, and Aurora was one of them. The turning point in my complete healing came when I helped a young private named Jessica, whose family situation eerily mirrored mine. Her sister had power of attorney and was draining accounts while Jessica was deployed to Kuwait. But this time we caught it early. This time the soldier had support and resources. This time the predator faced immediate consequences. Watching Jessica stand strong in court, seeing her family held accountable before irreparable damage was done, I finally felt the last of my bitterness dissolve. My pain had become purpose. Pearl Hendricks passed away peacefully 2 years after the trial, but not before seeing justice served. I spoke at her funeral, telling the assembled mourners how a 90-year-old woman's courage had helped expose the truth. Her photographs hadn't just documented birdwatching, they'd documented a crime that might have otherwise gone unpunished. She'd left me a small inheritance with a note, for the girl who fought battles abroad and at home with equal courage. I donated it to the Veteran Family Fraud Fund in her name. Looking back now, I realize Aurora actually gave me an unexpected gift. By burning down the life I'd expected to return to, she forced me to build something entirely new, something stronger, based on chosen relationships rather than blood obligations. I found my true calling in protecting other veterans from predatory families. I discovered that family isn't about shared DNA, but shared values. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the hardest battles are fought in courtrooms and family dining rooms, not foreign battlefields. Today, when I speak to deploying soldiers, I tell them to protect themselves legally as carefully as they'd protect themselves tactically. Set up safeguards, document everything, and don't assume family loyalty trumps greed. It's not cynical, it's practical. The uniform makes you a target in more ways than one. But I also tell them about the incredible support system waiting in the veteran community, about chosen families that won't betray you, about finding purpose in pain. Aurora tried to erase me, but instead she revealed exactly who I was meant to become. Sometimes the family that raises you isn't the family that deserves you. Real family shows up when you're at your lowest, not when it's convenient. My uniform may have made me invisible to those who shared my blood, but it made me visible to those who shared my values. If you're watching this as a veteran who's faced family betrayal, know that you're not alone. If you're someone who's been erased by those who should love you most, your story matters. Has anyone else experienced family turning against them during their most vulnerable moments? What helped you rebuild and find your chosen family? Please share your experiences in the comments below, because every story helps another warrior realize they can survive this battle too. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and triumph over family betrayal. Share this video with anyone who needs to know that blood doesn't always mean loyalty, and that sometimes the strongest families are the ones we choose. Thank you for witnessing my journey, and remember, your service, your sacrifice, and your truth can never be erased by someone else's lies.